All right, well, welcome everybody, and thanks for coming to Georgia Solar's first and likely not last webinar. Getting an echo there, so I need to turn my volume off. So my name is Montana Busch. I am co-chairman of Georgia Solar and also own Alternative Energy Southeast. And this webinar will be recorded, and so a link will be sent out once it's been published online. We are delighted to host this webinar to tell of the success of ours and many others' efforts to promote solar on the political front. Monthly netting is a major victory for the rooftop solar sector. We owe a huge thanks to Georgia Watch, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, or GIPL, South Face, Vote Solar, and Kurt Ebersbach with the Southern Environmental Law Center, or SELC, for their efforts at the Public Service Commission that led to the monthly netting policy change we'll be talking about today. Much gratitude as well to Commissioner Tim Echols for being with us today. Tim voted in favor of this new ruling, and he worked behind the scenes at the Public Service Commission to make this a reality. We will get to hear Kurt and Tim's thoughts and perspectives on net metering momentarily. Georgia Solar Energy Association, or Georgia Solar for short, has been working hard to promote the industry on several fronts. I'd like to encourage anyone who isn't a member to power up your solar connections by joining Georgia Solar. In addition to staying abreast of the latest solar news and trends, your support for Georgia Solar is the best way to keep the solar market growing in Georgia. Your dollars make our events and outreach possible, offering you and the community at large up-to-date information on technology, financing, and policy. Our programs help keep you informed and offer the very best networking opportunities for solar professionals, as well as solar advocates. Georgia Solar helps keep state and local leaders engaged and informed about the benefits solar brings to communities throughout the state. And Georgia Solar, we had extensive involvement in the 2019 IRP and rate case. These are proceedings that take place at the Public Service Commission, and solar advocates such as ourselves intervene, which means that we retain an attorney who works with us to develop testimony, hire expert witnesses, and we put together a panel of solar industry business owners to help make the case for more distributed generation in Georgia. There's a ton of utility scale solar, which we're very proud of, but we're lacking on the distributed generation side. So that's what we like to put a lot of focus on. And as a result of our testimony and that of the other interveners, we got many more megawatts of DG solar. I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors as well. If we can click to the next slide. These are our gold level sponsors: NextAmp, Euclid Networks, Inman Solar, GigaWord Communications, Creative Solar, Alternative Energy Southeast, and Arnold Golden Gregory. It'd be awesome. There we go. And silver level, we have CanSync, Radiant Solar, and a number of esteemed bronze level sponsors as well. With that said, I will hand things off to our moderator, Jennette, who's also my co-chair at Georgia Solar. Jennette is also the Executive Director of Environment Georgia. So Jennette, are you there?
I am. I'm not allowed to start my video, but maybe that's for the best. As we from home. Thank you, Montana. Thank you all for being here. It is a crazy time, but life continues, and there's some really exciting and important solar updates that we wanted to share with everybody. And then Montana did not mention this, unless I missed it, but we're also holding our first ever virtual happy hour or gathering, I guess, for solar enthusiasts in Georgia. So what we're going to do at the end of this webinar is share a link to a Zoom meeting So this is a Zoom webinar, which means we can't share everyone's videos, etc. But we'll share a link where everybody can join us on a Zoom meeting. Maybe you can run to your fridge and grab yourself a beverage, and then we'll gather in that new space 5 minutes after we adjourn here, to give everyone a chance to have a little fellowship. I feel like we're all very isolated these days, and we thought it was really important that we continue to come together as a solar community and support each other. So really excited to share some of these, the details of the monthly netting, but then also excited to hopefully see everybody's faces. All right, I'll run through quickly sort of the order of speakers that we have. And then I wanted to introduce our first speaker. So we're going to hear first from Commissioner Tim Echols, who's a commissioner at the Public Service Commission. Then from Kurt Ebersbach, who is a senior attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center. And then we're going to hear from 2 other Georgia Solar board members, Thatcher Young and Seth Gunning, who work with solar companies in the Georgia area or in Georgia. So Commissioner Echols, really excited to hand the baton off to you. Commissioner Echols was elected in 2010 to the Public Service Commission. He attended UGA, lives in Athens, where he does a really great job of walking the talk. He drives an electric vehicle. He has solar on his roof. So we are really excited to have you here and appreciate your partnership at the Public Service Commission in the past and moving forward. So commissioners, take it away.
Great, thank you, Jennette. Jennette, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great. Well, you know, my part of this really today is to give you the backstory on what happened that brought forward net metering and why did it take so long, right? I mean, I was asked about net metering. I remember being at a pre-election event in 2010 and sitting with James Marlowe, talking about net metering in 2010. We can go through the whole evolution of the growth of solar in Georgia, and net metering was always asked about. And, you know, I basically gave the same answer is, look, you know, I've talked to the, you know, part of the solar community is not in favor of this. They say the train's already left the station and it's just too late for this. And so we had, I think, some contention between the large scale solar guys who seem to have a lot of momentum at the commission, you know, and the rooftop DG guys, gals, and they weren't together. They weren't lobbying together. They were, you know, to me, they were working against each other in some regard. And they never could collectively get their lobbying power together until this year. And there was, and I want to give Ryan Sanders really a lot of credit on this, and Brad Carver, the attorney for that group. Brad is a, you know, very strong Republican. He, you know, he heads up, you know, one of our district, you know, Republican chapters. And he has, you know, he understands how to speak Republican. I mean, a lot of you do. I mean, a lot of you have really pivoted to economic development. You've got the messaging down. But, you know, having Brad, Ryan team up and kind of embrace the small scale, the DG guys and gals this year. And I remember sitting with the large scale guys as they had our small hearing room, and they were meeting with all the commissioners. And I said to them early on, this was early on, maybe even late 18, hey, you know, don't leave the DG guys behind. You guys don't have to, you know, push them down in order to succeed. I think both of these groups can move forward this year during this IRP and during this rate case. And I really saw, I feel like a, unprecedented working together between the two groups. You had the shirts printed, you had strong legal representation, both groups at the commission. There were a lot of people asking for the same thing, but net metering was not one of those things that really was being pressed. In fact, and I remember standing in Jason Shaw's office as we were approaching, ex parte in the rate case. We still had, I think, one more committee to go. And I remember Thatcher and James coming to me while I was standing in Jason's office. I think maybe the Georgia Restaurant Association was feeding us Chick-fil-A or something. I forget what was going on. And Thatcher and James said, hey, how about you think we could get monthly netting in any kind of settlement? So they asked one more time, the same thing that they had asked dozens, maybe more, over a 9-year period. And they asked one more time. And I don't know what it was, with that particular moment, but I looked at them and I thought, well, maybe that's a possibility, because I was working on a motion, and we had numbers of different motions going in the rate case. And I thought, well, maybe I could put it in that motion. Maybe we could make that happen. And I know the power companies on the call here, they might want to put their earplugs in right now or something, but I know the power company, they weren't excited about net metering. And you can see all the trouble that we're going to now to make it happen. I mean, a lot of you were asking about it. I mean, it has been, difficult to make happen. They would rather have addressed this in a separate docket. I can assure you we would not have got the same results had it been in a separate docket. I remember as a kid getting my tonsils out and how I hated to take pills. I couldn't swallow a pill. I had to chew things up. And I remember being in the hospital and them sticking the pill inside a scoop of ice cream and trying to trick me into swallowing the pill. And in some ways, I think we put this pill of net metering into a big scoop of ice cream. That was our rate settlement. Things the power company really needed, the capital structure, the ROE, things that they really needed as a company to keep their interest rates low, and a whole host of other things. But we put that into that ice cream, so to speak. And frankly, I don't think it would have passed without that. I mean, I know Kurt was there. We had everybody, pushing similar aspects of solar, but it was so important, I think, that this was part of a package. And I'm really grateful to my colleagues for going along with me on this, because they certainly didn't have to. And I've had other things early in my career at the commission that didn't go over so well. But I really think that, and it took this to get it done, the caps that we put on it, the 32 new megawatts, and the 5,000 total, that was important. Without it, we wouldn't have it at all. So it was better to get that than nothing at all. But I do want to I just want to say thank you, Georgia Solar, for your faithfulness, your persistence, to AGG, John Gornall. It's been such an important, person in my career. James, Thatcher, Ryan, a whole host of folks, Don, on this call. And let's make this successful. Let's have a great experience with this so that when we come back in 2022, we've got some fantastic news to be able to report. So it was great working through this. I'm glad we were able to get this done, and I know it's going to change the value proposition for a lot of rooftop solar owners, and I'm really glad about that.
Thank you, Commissioner. We really appreciate you being with us today. And I should have also mentioned when I was kicking things off that we think left plenty of time at the end for questions. So if you have questions, you can either save them or you can start typing them into the chat box, and we will make sure that we get to them when we get to the question and answer period. All right, I want to now introduce Kurt Ebersbach, who is a senior attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center. Commissioner Echols, I think, mentioned him a couple times in his presentation, so folks know he was in the mix, and we're hoping can really dig in and start explaining where did this concept of monthly netting come from, helping us understand the language in the law that helped us make the case for this program. Kurt, I think you have some slides to share.
I do. I'm not quite sure how to do it. Do you know?
I do. You should look at the bottom. Along the bottom of your screen, there should be something called share screen that's green.
Okay. Screen 2 is me, right? So, and I apologize, I can't get the video to work for me because I think I would lose my monitors. It's just through my laptop. Let's see. Okay, so does that look like a normal PowerPoint? I have the presenter view on. Does that look normal? You can't see it?
I see a black screen.
Huh. Well, why don't I just talk through it, and maybe y'all can post it later if folks want to see it. It's a pretty simple presentation anyways. But thank you, Jennette, and thanks everyone for having me here. It's nice to see everyone. So let me just start by saying the way we viewed this issue and how it came about. So this was in the last year's rate case, of course. I worked for the Southern Environmental Law Center. We represented Georgia Interfaith Power and Light and Vote Solar and South Face in this matter. And fundamentally, we come at this issue from the perspective of customer rights and fairness. And we're not just talking about that in the abstract. Of course, we support more solar customers and we support customers getting adequate compensation. But there's actually a statute on point here. And it was our strong feeling. Oh, do you have it now? Okay. Now, how do I change?
Hey, Kurt, this is Seth. You can just
let you know? Okay. But now I've lost my, hang on. Okay, I think I'm good now. All right. Okay, can you go ahead and put it on number 2? Okay. So as I said, we approach this from the customer fairness lens, and but again, what we're trying to do is give effect to a statute that's been on the books now for almost 20 years, and that's called the Georgia Cogeneration and Distributed Generation Act of 2001. And you can go ahead and move to the next slide, Seth, please. So I've just summarized a little bit of the statute right here, but the real important thing from the outset to note is that what this statute was all about is the public interest in the form of encouraging private investment in renewable energy resources. So very important statutory purpose here. And basically what the statute does is requires utilities, not just Georgia Power, but utilities throughout Georgia, to credit and compensate solar customers for their systems production. Now, Georgia Power, of course, is a regulated utility, so the mechanism for implementation is a rate tariff on file with the commission. Next slide, please. And so what is that mechanism? It's the R&R tariff, the Renewable and Non-Renewable Resources Tariff. So as I said, it's been on file with the commission for almost as long as the Cogen Act has been around. So customers who have solar who desire to sell electrical energy to the company can do so pursuant to this tariff. There is a size limitation for residential of less than or equal to 10 kilowatts. And for commercial, it's 250 kilowatts, but there's also a limitation on how it can't exceed 125% of metered peak demand for the premises. And that commercial limit was actually raised a couple of years ago, which was another positive development for the solar community. All right, next slide, please. So what was all the fuss about going into this case? We and other advocates, solar advocates, said that the Cogen Act requires monthly netting, whereas Georgia Power's practice has been to do instantaneous netting. Now, what is netting? And I think Seth will get into this a little bit later, but in its most basic sense, netting is the length of time over which a customer's consumption and generation are evaluated to determine a customer's net consumption. So this isn't just a technical detail. The differences in what the netting period are can have substantial impacts on a customer's investment. So let me just give a really simple example. If you're a customer with solar and you consume 1,000 kilowatt hours of grid energy over the month, and your system exports 500 kilowatt hours of solar to the system, under monthly netting, your bill would be based on just 500 kilowatt hours of consumption. So that net consumption times the retail rate is going to be your bill. Under Georgia Power's approach, that same customer would be billed in full for 1,000 kilowatt hours at the retail rate, but then receive solar avoided cost, which is only about 3 cents per kilowatt hour for the 500 kilowatt hours of exports. So these differences can really add up, and that's what this chart here attempts to depict, and this was attached to our testimony. So this just looking at a basic residential system size. So under instantaneous netting, you can have $400 less value per year, which over the life of the system can be as much as $13,000. Now, on a net present value basis, that's up to 1/3 of the system's cost. And so we felt that the way that the netting was happening was really contrary to the statute's express purpose of encouraging private investment in solar generation. Okay, so next slide, please. So what were our key arguments? So number one, we noted that the R&R tariff in its current form and the way it's been since 2003 never explained to customers what the netting period is and what Georgia Power's methodology is. It just referred customers to the Cogen Act itself. And we felt that violated rate-making principles whereby customers are supposed to be able to understand the rates that they're paying and the tariffs that they're on. And we noted that it's very hard for a customer to make this significant investment decision without understanding what it's going to be. We also said that instantaneous netting conflicted with the Cogen Act's requirement, which directs utilities to credit customers for excess kilowatt hours generated during the billing period. So our argument was the billing period is what most people think a billing period is the month or something close to it, because that's how you receive your utility bill. And we noted language in the statute that talks about measuring production or consumption implied that it's one or the other, and that you're not just measuring both and instantaneously crediting them and then totaling it all up each month at the end for the bill. We felt the tariff did not reflect normal metering practice, although I should note that neither that term nor billing period are defined by the statute, which was part of the problem. And lastly, we noted that that customers under the community solar program administered by Georgia Power do receive monthly netting, and therefore to not provide similar treatment for customers under the R&R tariff appeared to be discriminatory. Okay, next slide, please. So what is normal metering practice? So again, the statute didn't define that. So what we did was we looked at Georgia Power's list of peer utilities. And this was a list that Georgia Power itself provided as part of its more general rate case. I know it's kind of hard to read, but the takeaway from this slide is that out of 32 peer utilities, 22 of them offer netting of at least a month or longer, and only 6 used instantaneous netting. So we felt that was a pretty good indication of what the normal practices were nationwide. I'd also note from this slide that you can see Georgia Power's residential solar penetration is the second to lowest on the list. Only Alabama Power is lower. So this is solar capacity as a percentage of peak demand. So it just goes to show that there really isn't much solar, behind the meter solar on the system at all in Georgia. And you can compare it to states like Arizona or the city of San Diego, where it ranges more in the nature of 10 to 20%. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so you know, Georgia Power did a great job of presenting its position. They have great legal counsel, and I don't mean to speak for them. This is just a summary of some of the arguments that they made throughout the proceeding. Not all of them, but the basic ones. So essentially they said, well, you talk about normal metering practice. Well, these are bidirectional meters, and what they do is they measure it going one way or the other. They can't do both at the same time. So they made this distinction between how solar production is credited and how it's measured. Essentially saying that the billing period addresses how and when the customer is credited, not how inflows and outflows are measured. In other words, they were saying that instantaneous netting is okay, provided for that we account for it on your monthly bill, which is what they do. They also said we don't need to consider utilities in other states because those utilities aren't subject to the Cogen Act. They said community solar was not a valid comparison because customers in those programs pay to subscribe, and the subscription costs are intended to prevent cross subsidies. But on that point, I should note that Georgia Power has already conceded through its solar framework document that the total benefits of distributed generation solar generally outweigh the costs, at least at the levels of penetration that we have now and are likely to have going forward. And also the evidence in the rate case showed that solar customers in Georgia Power service territory remain higher than average consumers of electricity. So there really isn't, it's our belief there really isn't evidence of any kind of cost shift. The company also noted that the commission had approved this tariff 9 times before without any issue about netting. And then finally, they as Commissioner Echols noted a moment ago, they said, let's wait until another docket. Let's kick the can down the road. And our response to that was, well, no time like the present, because this is a rate case and this is where you deal with things like tariffs. Okay, next slide, and this is the final slide. So here's language from the order itself. And yes, you should thank Commissioner Echols for this. We've talked about a lot of numbers in this presentation, but the only one that matters is 3, meaning 3 commissioners voting in favor of something. And so Commissioner Echols not only listened to everything we had to say and met with us several times about this and really understood our arguments, but he also helped convince his colleagues to go in this direction. So we're very grateful for his leadership. There is a cap, which I think Seth will talk about more in a moment. But I think we're pretty far away from it. There are only about 955 customers on the R&R tariff currently. And I think residential and commercial combined, it amounts only to about 10 megawatts. So there's significant headroom for customers on the tariff and to join the tariff and to reap the benefits of monthly netting. In terms of the status of the implementation, it's my understanding the company is still working hard on this, and obviously the virus doesn't help get this underway. But I think we can expect that the crediting will start happening sometime this summer. And it's my understanding that Georgia Power is working with the commission to the extent feasible to retroactively apply the crediting to January of this year. So customers will get those benefits as well. And I'll just say one last thing. Some of y'all may know there was this filing with FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, by a ratepayer advocacy group out of New England that essentially seeks to get rid of net metering across the country. It's a very controversial filing, and it's something that we're going to be participating in and opposing. I don't think it's going to go anywhere because it really does amount to an assault on states' rights. Nevertheless, it is something we should all be looking at and aware of, because if it were successful, it would eliminate this result and have a similar effect to solar customers across the nation.
Thank you, Kurt.
That's all.
All right. Appreciate sharing a lot of questions in the chat box. And then it seems like some of our panelists are already starting to answer them. So thank you. I also think that the next two presentations that we have from Thatcher and Seth will answer a lot of the questions that I've seen in the chat box so far. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Thatcher, who is, wow, Thatcher, you are just coming to us from a really beautiful spot.
That's right. So mentally, I'm in Yellowstone National Park, even though physically I'm in Marietta, Georgia. So the background's better than my guest room wall. Thanks, Jennette. Seth, do you want to put up our slides? Great. So there's been a number of really good questions on the chat. I've been trying hard to keep up with those. Some of those questions are about kind of the specifics, which Seth will get into momentarily. What I wanted to just touch on briefly was kind of the macro level impact of what this means for the growth of solar over the next couple of years. And as Commissioner Echols said, it only took us 9 years to get to this point. So never lose hope, and that you keep asking Dad for the keys and eventually you'll get the truck. You just may not give them back. So that's kind of where we are with monthly netting. What we've seen in some of our neighboring states is that net metering is really the keys to the castle. So as everyone has seen the incentives, external incentives for solar changing, those going down, like the ITC stepping down from 30% to 26 and then to 22 next year. The value of solar installed on your home or business is really going to be derived from the direct energy value that you receive on your bill or through your meter. And that's why it's been such a key issue for us and why we've pushed for it for so long. And so, where we are right now is a significant number of solar installations in Georgia. We rank 11th in the U.S. in total solar installed. But if Seth will click to the next slide, you'll see the context of what that means kind of specifically for solar behind the meter. So while we're 11th in the nation overall, we're about 48th in the nation in ratio of behind the meter solar installations to utility scale solar installations. And the main difference there is somewhat the economics of behind the meter solar, which is driven primarily by the value that you get for that solar. And so really pushing for what we call parity. So getting actual retail value for the solar that you put back on the grid or you consume in your home against what you pay the utility company for the energy you consume is really the key to then allowing these systems to stand on their own. And so if we look at a couple of our neighboring states, South Carolina, I think, is an interesting lesson in what the future today could look like had we allowed for retail net metering several years ago. So maybe when we had asked Tim in year 6 or 7 instead of year 9, South Carolina really started allowing retail net metering back in late 2015. And so between 2015 and 2018, they saw 1,000% increase in the number of solar systems installed. And these are just residential numbers, right? So these are homes with solar. Doesn't even account for the commercial businesses that are installed. And then if we look at, some of our other neighboring states, so again, South Carolina as an example, right? The projected increase for them is fairly similar on the utility scale side. So they, project to have a little about, 1.5 gigawatts of solar from utility in 2022, but they look to have 230 megawatts of distributed generation by 2022. And Georgia will go from about 140 megawatts last year to 151 megawatts by 2022. So you can already see that the projected impact of having retail net metering or monthly netting is super significant. So then if you again look at a neighboring state like Florida or North Carolina, both of which have had monthly netting or retail net metering in place for some time, you'll see the balance in growth rate of the yellow box, which is distributed solar, continuing to step up year on year, even as utility scale solar continues to grow. So it really creates a much more balanced and equitable position. Next slide, please, Seth. So, the other question that a number of people have put on the chat box is, well, what does this mean if I'm not a Georgia Power customer? And the truth is we still have work to do. And our first action is to continue to work with Commissioner Echols and the other public service commissioners to do exactly what he said and to prove out that there is significant value in this change. And we want to make sure that we have 4,999 customers signed up for retail monthly netting before 2022 is out, so that we can prove that absolutely this is something that customers want and that all Georgia Power customers should have access to this same. Our second action is to work with our friends at the electric cooperatives and to help them follow the lead of some of their own members. So Cobb EMC, Flint, Amicalola already offer monthly netting or retail net metering for their customers. And we want to see all 27 of the electric co-ops to follow similarly and implement similar rules. And so we're going to work with them. Obviously, they are not regulated in the same way that Georgia Power is regulated. So it's really a much more grassroots and a one-on-one type conversation. And we as the association are engaged in some of those conversations already, but would welcome any customers of an EMC or a MEAG who's on the phone today who would like help engaging their utility. We would love to join you in those conversations and can help you work through how to encourage them to do that. And then the fourth action is to work with the General Assembly, as Kurt said, to really clarify the language in the Cogeneration Act to make monthly netting or retail net metering without restriction the rule for all electric utilities. That's a bigger lift, and we don't have time to go into sort of the specifics of the policy path there on this call. But ultimately, we believe strongly that monthly netting is what the intent was of the writers of the Cogeneration Act and is the most equitable way for consumers to be credited and to gain true value for their solar systems. And so we're going to continue to fight for that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Seth and let Seth get into the weeds of exactly what we know about the Georgia Power program and how you can find out more information and eventually sign up for the program. So over to you, Seth.
Thank you, Thatcher. And thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. My name's Seth Gunning. I'm the Director of Sales for Creative Solar in Kennesaw, Georgia, and a newly elected board member of Georgia Solar. So we're going to spend a few minutes sort of talking about the nuts and bolts of Georgia Power's monthly netting program, what we know about how monthly netting works, what it means for existing and new solar system owners and their utility bills, and how to sign up. But I should qualify that conversation by stating that there's still some information about methodology and implementation of this program that we don't yet know. Georgia Power and their renewables development team are hard at work coming up with an implementation plan. And we've been told to expect or to look for implementation sometime around June of this year. We'd encourage everybody to go to Georgia Power's website on this issue, georgiapower.com/RNR, and I'll put that website up in a little while, to sign up to get information when Georgia Power is ready to start communicating sort of their implementation plan. So I'm sure folks are very familiar with this process, but we have a diverse audience today. So I want to just step back and clarify some of these terms for laymen about how solar metering works in general. So solar panels obviously produce electricity when hit by solar irradiance. Solar panels produce DC power. We use AC power in our homes and businesses, so we have to convert that to AC using an inverter. That power is first and foremost used in the home, in the business, to meet any electrical demand that exists on that infrastructure. Any excess solar, so solar produced above what is being consumed in the building, is then passed through the utility meter and sold to the electrical grid. The utility company will then distribute that excess solar likely to your neighbors or to the nearest source of demand. And they're obligated to provide some credit for that excess solar electricity, assuming that your system meets some requirements set by the Cogeneration Distribution Act. And then when the sun goes down in the evening time or on a very cloudy day when your solar is not producing enough electricity and you need to continue to draw power from the grid, the grid will supply your demand as it usually does. The meter that's capable of reading in both directions when you're selling power from your home or business to the grid and reading power moving from the grid to the home or business, it's called a bidirectional meter. Slides. So how Georgia Power provides compensation for your excess solar is based on what rate rider or solar rate rider that you're on. So we want to quickly go over some of the various programs that Georgia Power offers. And these riders are available to any Georgia Power customer, regardless of whether or not you are on a residential rate schedule, a nights and weekends plan, a flex pay, or a commercial power and light plan. Signing up for one of these riders or tariffs doesn't change the rate schedule you're on or what you pay Georgia Power when you consume power from them. The main solar programs for behind the meter solar, and I guess I should define behind the meter. When we say that, we mean customers that have solar on their homes or businesses. They're often rooftop solar installations where that production is primarily being used to offset the purchase of electricity. So it's being used primarily on the premises or on the location. So the two we're talking about here are renewable, non-renewable, or oftentimes called R&R, and energy offset only. The commission's order only impacts renewable, non-renewable. So the monthly net metering program that we're talking about today only impacts Georgia Power customers who have systems that meet the requirements of this program and are enrolled in R&R. There may be some existing solar owners out there that are either on the energy offset only tariff or aren't on any tariff at all. And if you're one of those folks, you want to make sure that you're on renewable, non-renewable in order to benefit from the monthly netting program. And as a sort of side note, I'll mention that Georgia Power also has offered some sell-all programs where all the solar energy produced by a system is sold back to the utility at a set rate. To my knowledge, those programs are currently fully subscribed and many of them have been expired. In the 2019 rate case, the Public Service Commission did approve a new set of sell-all programs for small commercial residential called Customer Connect, but the details of those programs are still being negotiated. So what we're talking about here is really just R&R. Kurt went over this a little bit, but the requirements to be on R&R set in part by the Georgia Cogeneration Act are that your system is at most 10 kilowatts for residential and 250 kilowatts for commercial. It needs to be on the property that the meter is located. That 10 kilowatts and 250 kilowatts is read at the inverter, not the solar panel, so it's AC production, and it's per meter. So both programs, R&R and energy offset, I should say anything over that amount, 10 or 20, 250 kilowatts, you're eligible for the energy offset only program. Both energy offset and R&R use bidirectional metering to track excess solar energy production and demand in the property. But the big difference is that R&R gives some credit for excess solar production, where energy offset only, you don't receive anything if you're producing over your demand and sending excess solar back to the utility. So you're essentially giving Georgia Power excess solar energy for free. And so I'll talk in a moment about how to ensure that you're signed up for R&R. If you're an existing solar system owner, you're looking to become one. But I would strongly encourage everybody to go to the Georgia Solar website to find a reputable installer who understands the requirements of these programs and will do all the work to get you signed up for them when they do your installation. We have a great list of installers. I'll throw that website up in just a little while. So how does monthly netting work? How are these credits calculated, and what's the big difference between how Georgia Power is metering now and how they will be metering under monthly netting? So this is a real world example of a solar energy system and its power production, which is in blue, and a home's energy demand, which is in orange. It's from just a few days ago, nice sunny day, so you can see that the solar production is evenly distributed throughout the day, peaking about midday. But power demand in a particular location is not usually a smooth line or curve like that. Power demand spikes throughout the day when you turn on your AC, when you plug in your electric vehicle. So in this case, all the solar highlighted in blue that is above or in excess of the demand in the home is being sent back to Georgia Power. Georgia Power is tracking that net difference, so that's the net in monthly netting, with their bidirectional meter. Prior to monthly netting, Georgia Power was looking at that netting on a real-time basis. Their netting period was instantaneous. So what that meant is that the solar exported to the grid in any given moment was credited at their avoided cost, or about 3 cents a kilowatt hour. And that in comparison to an average residential rate of about 12 cents a kilowatt hour, if you're including taxes and fees. So under real-time netting, any and all of the solar production exported received about 1/4 of what the retail rate is. Even as you can see in this example, where at 3:45, this person is, or the system is sending back about 2 kilowatts of energy and getting 3 cents for it. And then just 15 minutes later, they get home from work, or an air conditioning unit flips on, and they are then consuming about 4 kilowatts and paying 12 cents a kilowatt hour for it. So what that has meant for our market is that to ensure that all or the vast majority of your solar production is getting consumed in the home and you're getting the full financial value of that production, folks have been installing systems that are significantly undersized to their monthly or annual demand, or coupling systems with battery energy storage systems to make sure, again, that solar energy is consumed in the home. Now, with monthly netting, Georgia Power, it won't be looking at that netting instantaneously. They're looking at it once a month at the end of the billing period. So you can produce solar in excess during the daytime and consume it again in the evening or later in the billing period and receive the full financial value as if it were consumed in the home to offset your utility consumption. Monthly netting, that allows for some tolerance in hourly and daily fluctuations in power demand and solar production, and doesn't financially penalize a customer for producing too little or too much power in any given moment. It effectively provides a credit at the retail rate for all the solar energy delivered to the grid under the amount that you consume from the grid in that whole month. So you might say, well, if Georgia Power is going to pay me a retail rate for the solar I sell them, why don't I just build the biggest system possible and get a big check cut from them at the end of the month? But under monthly netting, if you produce more than you consume over the whole month, that monthly net excess is still credited at the avoided cost rate. So to use that example that Kurt gave a little while ago, if you produce and send back 1,000 kilowatt hours from your solar energy system over the course of a month, but you only consume, let's say 800 from the grid, so there's a 200 kilowatt monthly excess over the course of the month, that 200 kilowatts isn't going to roll over to the next month like it would if we were in a full net metering or an annual net metering state or utility territory. You're essentially going to get avoided cost for that, which amounts to close to $5 or $6 on that existing bill. It doesn't roll over. So this, like Thatcher was saying, this sort of program allows us to offset a much higher portion of someone's energy demand without the need for energy storage or battery systems. There are clearly still lots of benefits to battery energy storage, like providing grid resiliency, being able to back up your home or business in a grid outage, but they're no longer required to get the full value of the solar that you're producing on your property. So one of the things we don't yet know about how monthly netting will be implemented is how it's going to work on rate structures that are variable or time-based rate schedules. What we can speak to is how it works in other utility territories like Cobb EMC here in Georgia that offers monthly netting and has a time of use rate or electric vehicle rate, where the rate that you pay is dependent on what time of day you consume that electricity. So in Cobb EMC territory, this graph shows the same solar production that we just looked at, overlaid with Georgia Power's electric vehicle rates. For this solar owner, a kilowatt sent back at 1 p.m. when the purchase rate is 7 kilowatts would get credited 7 kilowatts for what they send back. At 2 p.m. when that on-peak rate kicks in, a kilowatt sent back to the grid is credited against another on-peak kilowatt consumed later in the day, later in the month, or at 20 cents a kilowatt hour. So I wanted to provide a real world example of someone's utility bills that already has solar. This is an example of a fairly smaller than average solar energy system. But to sort of reinforce what Kurt talked about earlier about how moving from instantaneous netting to monthly netting of energy increases the value proposition of a solar energy system by about 30%. So the first thing is if you are questioning whether or not you are on the R&R or renewable non-renewable tariff, I'm sure we're all familiar with a utility bill like this from Georgia Power. If you pull out your bill, On that second page under rate rider, you will either see R&R or energy offset only if you're a homeowner or business owner that has a solar energy system. You want to look at that to determine whether or not you will sort of be grandfathered into this monthly netting. So this customer in February sent 158 kilowatt hours back to the grid over the course of the month. This is how Georgia Power has traditionally billed and metered excess solar production. That 158 kilowatt hours at their about 3 cent a kilowatt hour avoided cost rate saves the customer $4.27 at the end of the month. Under monthly netting, what's essentially happening is that 302 kilowatts of total consumption over the month the 158 kilowatts of excess production is subtracted from the 302 kilowatts of total grid consumption. And then the remainder, or 144 kilowatts, is charged the regular residential rate. So the difference between these two is a bill of $45 a month and a bill of $30 a month, or about 30% additional savings from moving to monthly netting. So how do you get signed up? If you're an existing solar owner, check your rate rider to make sure that you are signed up. We've been given indication that anyone who's currently on the R&R tariff will be retroactively rolled into the new monthly netting. And what that means is, let's say monthly netting starts in June. That's when Georgia Power is able to implement the program. They're going to attempt to go back to January 1st of this year and recalculate all of your bills to ensure that monthly netting is implemented for the full calendar 2020 year. The program's available to the first 5,000 rooftop solar ratepayers, of which there are already about 1,000 people signed up for R&R, or the next 32 megawatts of additional capacity. So that means we have 32 megawatts of new capacity that can come online and be signed up for R&R. The existing 1,000 people or so that are on R&R right now don't contribute to that 32 megawatt number. That is just new capacity moving forward. They do contribute to the 5,000 number of rooftop solar ratepayers. Yeah, but not the capacity. Again, sign up at georgiapower.com/R&R to get updates from the company. If you are installing your own system, or you want to go try to move yourself from energy offset to on R&R, you can go to Georgia Power's Power Clerk website. That's where you submit new interconnection and distributed energy agreements. But I would strongly encourage folks who are interested in doing that to find and reach out to a reputable solar installer. It's some of the information that the utility requires to submit those agreements is pretty technical, and there are plenty of solar installers who'd be happy to help you do it. So you can go to georgiasolar.org/find-a-professional to see a list of reputable solar installers in the state. And then we want to be, lastly, we want to be really transparent about what we don't yet know. And those things are exactly when the monthly netting is going to start, and when it will be credited retroactively back to the beginning of the year. How Georgia Power is going to communicate the number of installations and the total capacity that's being counted against the caps. How they're communicating those things to either installers or the public, we're not yet sure. And so for the installers on the phone, we're also not yet sure when in a solar development does a project get counted against those caps. It could, is it at contract? Is it at when an interconnection agreement is signed, or when the actual meter work gets done? We haven't yet gotten those answers from Georgia Power. And we talked about this a little bit. The last thing is how monthly netting will work against or with a time of use rate plan like the electric vehicle rate plan. And with that, I think we will take some questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Seth. And I'll just say the question answering on the chat box has been rapid and includes comments from Jamie Barber of the Public Service Commission. So thank you so much to Jamie for joining us. All right, I'm going to try, this might be a more challenging undertaking than I expected. I'm going to just start going through some of the questions that are coming up now that I don't think have been answered yet. So we have one here. So how do we know that the 10 kilowatt limit, as you said, is, I think it's basically asking the 10 kilowatt limit that is currently in existence for residential, is that based on what goes out, what you're sending back to the meter? Is that based on what you have set up on your roof? How do you calculate that 10 kilowatt limit? I think that's what that question is asking. I'll send that to Thatcher. He looks like
Yeah,
he's just
Jennette, I
unmuted
can
himself.
take care of that. So, yes, the 10 kilowatt size limit is based on the AC nameplate output of your solar system. So it does not impact currently the size. That's controlled by another piece of policy that we don't have time to get into right now today. But yes, for a residential customer, it's our understanding that the size limit will remain 10 kilowatts AC. For a commercial customer, it will remain 250 kilowatts AC to take advantage of monthly netting.
All right, so if folks want to continue posting in the chat new questions, here we go. Does monthly netting affect reduce the fixed charges on a customer's bill?
No, your monthly charges, taxes and fees will remain the same. So it will only impact your consumption value on your bill. There's also been a couple questions, Jennette, about does it have to be a rooftop system? Can it be a ground mount system? And the answer to that is yes, it can be. It just has to be a behind the meter system. So connected on your side of the meter, not the utility side of the meter.
And I would add about, or to the question about your monthly fees, the Public Service Commission, as a part of the rate case last year, did remove the monthly fee that's associated with the R&R tariff. So if you're it's my understanding that now if you're a renewable, non-renewable tariff holder, then you no longer pay that. I think it was $2.50 a month.
Hey, this is Tim. Just to add, I just sent a text over to Georgia Power asking for some clarification. I said once net metering has been activated on the customer's account, they will receive an email from Georgia Power letting them know the effective net billing date. So you're going to get something from them. Their billing system, according to this text, will show something like R&R monthly or R&R instant on the customer's bill once the change has been made. So what I had a conversation earlier today with Kurt and Thatcher, and we were just talking through some of the issues that have been coming up. And one of the issues has been, hey, when do I know that this is done? I need some indication. And so Georgia Power is going to respond to that. They're going to give some communication to let you know, and then it will say either R&R monthly, R&R instant on the bill once it's been done.
We've got a question that is, first of all, just asking if I'm, basically getting ready to install solar panels on my roof in the next month or so, we'll say, will I be able to be included in this monthly netting option? So that's part one of the question. And then part two is, are there changes that I might want to consider making to my system given the reality that it could be or will be, if it will be, monthly netted? So maybe one of our installers, Thatcher or Seth, could you guys answer that?
Yes, Seth, you want to take that one?
So the first part of the question, absolutely. If you're getting a system installed now and you're a Georgia Power customer, assuming that the system you're installing meets the requirements of Georgia Power's interconnection agreement and their capacity limits, then you will absolutely be eligible for the monthly netting. Can you repeat the second part of the question, Jennette?
The second part is, are there changes that you might want to make to your system, based on the fact that you will be able to monthly net it? So maybe you make it a little bit larger, whatever.
Yeah. Knowing now, so like I was saying, showing that production chart, lots of installers have been undersizing systems for many years to ensure that when you have a solar only system without energy storage, that all of the production of that system is being consumed on site. Most installers want to make sure that you're getting the full value of all of the kilowatt hour, all the capacity that solar energy system is producing. Now, because we have monthly netting, you can oversize that system and essentially size a system to 100% offset of your lowest monthly bill or lowest monthly expected usage, and still get the full value of all of the solar production on the roof. So you might want to work with your solar consultant and see if the system that they have proposed for you or that you're planning to get on your roof is sized to sort of that maximum level.
All right, and I'm gonna ask, I've got one question here that I'm gonna ask. While I'm doing that, Montana, will you start to share the link for our Zoom happy hour or hangout, I guess? So I'll ask this one question while Montana is doing that, and it seems like if another question comes in, maybe another question that has come in from Sean, I'll try to ask 2 more questions. Okay, so the first one was just asking panelists to kind of give their best guess as to when we think the cap will be reached at our current rate of installation. So I will throw that to the panel and see rapid fire. Maybe we can get a couple different answers.
So it's effectively taken us a decade or so to get 1,000 customers on R&R, about 10 megawatts. But as Thatcher showed us, monthly netting sort of accelerates the financial value of a solar energy system. So I would not be surprised if by the end of 2021 we're very close to that mark. That's my prediction.
You know, we're seeing so many people want batteries with a solarized program. I think our systems are in for, a big change in the future. I think we're just going to see so many batteries installed, and in some ways it'll either cause the systems to be oversized, as Seth mentioned, or folks won't be feeding back at all. So I think batteries are going to be a game changer, and given the fact that we've got some tax credit associated with it, and if you do it with solar, I think that it's a whole new world now with storage.
All right, great job, guys. And then actually, I think the next questions that got asked were all answered. So thank you guys for joining us. This has been really, really fun. It's been fun to see some faces that I haven't seen in a long time. I hope everyone can join us on the chat that Montana just shared with us. Montana, maybe you can share it one more time. So we'll, take like a 5-minute break, 10-minute break for people to go grab a drink, get onto this different portal where we can all talk to each other. If you've got other questions that you haven't gotten answered, the chat will continue, so we can answer questions over chat, share information so that we can continue to network. I think that's a role that Georgia Solar has always helped to play, is helped to be a real networker and community builder in the solar community. So we want to make sure that we're doing that. We've already started talking about what are the next webinars that we can do. So if you've got an idea, feel free to shoot it to us. And want to thank our panelists again. Commissioner Echols, thank you so much for joining us. Kurt, Thatcher, Seth, really appreciate everyone's expertise. Montana, appreciate your co-chairmanship. And Jamie, special shout out to you for joining us in the chat box. So thank you guys, and hopefully people can join us over on this other Zoom meeting instead of webinar. Bye guys.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.